Welcome, everybody, to another installment of Crew Oddities. Today, we are going to be talking about the folklore of the original Dracula. Bram Stoker maybe have gotten his inspiration here. His name is Abhartach. I'm Goldie.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Keenan. Come with us as we take a dive into the dark and mysterious world of Abhartach, the dwarf wizard vampire.
So, the legend of Abhartach, which Abhartach is actually Irish for dwarf. Um, he's a original Irish legend. Um, so he hails from, I'm gonna butcher the shit out of this name because I'm not Irish. Glunion, possibly. That's how you pronounce it. It's on the northern east side of Ireland. So he was one of several chieftains that ruled over this land in the 5th century. So now he was a dwarf, a magician, and he was just an evil tyrant that his life was rule with fear and would slaughter his people just because he thought that they would potentially do something wrong in the future. He would just fucking take them out. So his townsmen were too scared to kill him themselves, so they went ahead and went to a neighboring chieftain, and this is where it kind of splits off into two different versions of the same story, with the original legend saying that it was Mac Camale, that
That's pretty close.
he was a rival chieftain and he went and killed Abhartach. And he killed him. After the next day, Abhartach returned, knocking on the door of his townsmen, asking for their blood in a bowl, which starts the theory of vampires. So Cummin, giggity, Cumel decided that, okay, I'm gonna kill him a second time. So they killed him and buried him. Well, the next day he came back to life, demanding more blood. So Kamal came over and went to a druid where he then asked how he would kill this undead creature. The druid told him that he had to bury him upside down head first in the earth, but stab him in the chest with a yew wood sword, place a heavy rock on top of it, and spread thorn branches around the rock. Which we have a picture slideshow of just various Dracula esque, and there's actually a tree and rock that's the actual rock that's on top of his gravesite. So he does this, and Avarok does not come back. Avartok does not come back. Excuse me. And then the alternate version is Cathian was the rival chieftain, and instead of a druid, he went to a early Christian saint, where he got the same information on how to slaughter Abhartach. That's the quick, brief rundown of just the beginning of this lore, and the lore eventually spirals through and actually goes through three of the most haunted areas of Ireland at the same time. They're all connected through this one specific lore story of the Abby the Black Hag, where she was a rich. I want to say she wasn't the Duchess. The Duchess was buried alive at her cell site. But she was of noble birth, and she dabbled in black magic and her sexuality. And she terrified all of the town, and they burned her and buried her. And one of the pictures is a bridge, and that's where she was buried. That's where they had her burned and all that stuff. So it goes through that, and then it talks about a battle of between the Jacobites and the Williamites, where the Williamites just utterly obliterated all of the Jacobites. So their blood ran down and formed a pool down at the bottom of this hillside, and they're all interlinked together, which we will, further elaborate on. And it's also the way Bram Stoker grew up in Ireland in his adolescent years and has been told the recounts of these stories, and that might have shaped his vision of Dracula that we know today. It brings together the blood drinking, the fact that he was a dwarf magician, could be the mystical fog and the transformations into bats, the killing him with a stake to the heart. All of these things, the reason why he sleeps upside down, hanging from like a rafter or something, it kind of all just ties into this one folklore, and there's a lot of speculation that this is actually where he got the ideas. And there's also the Irish word, which is drac-ula, which is translated to bad or tainted blood, bad ground or tainted blood. And I mean, it kind of speaks for itself in translation of drac-ula to Dracula, just slightly different pronunciation and spelling. So this could all stem from that. I don't know if you guys have anything pulled up on the Black Hag in front of you right now. Okay. So I'll cut right here. I'll do a cut right here so we can kind of organize it a little bit. I'll cover the story of the Williamites and fucking Black Hag in more detail because I have the shit pulled up in front of me right now. And then the Bram Stoker Dracula, we've all read Dracula, so we could just talk about it.
Everyone knows Dracula.
Yeah, we could talk about Dracula. So if you guys want to fucking talk about the original legend of fucking Abhartach.
Abhartach.
Abhartach. Yeah, many people might not know this, but this is also where Abhartach comes from. Is his name.
You're pulling so much shit out of your ass. Look at me, Willie. It's the size of a tree.
The tree that is upon me is actually my pea. Okay, fucking one of y'all go. Or not.
I'm thinking of where I'm going to start. So, Nick, do you have a starting point right now? I'm trying to think.
No.
No? Okay. Well, you covered the small portion of it, so do you want me to go a bit more in depth?
Yes.
Okay, so... okay. Abhartach itself is a Celtic word that is spelled nothing like how it's pronounced. Thank you, Celtic. But he originally he's a dwarf that was believed to have magical powers. And that's where the whole dwarf wizard thing comes from for all these legends. This is all set in what is now modern day, I'm going to slaughter this, but it's Slataverti. And he was basically a evil tyrant in this land, and he was an awful man, awful tiny man that was extremely paranoid and hated people themselves. So he, on a regular basis, would kill a lot of his subjects and other people because of how paranoid he was that they have already done something to wrong him. So he would slaughter them for no reason whatsoever other than like, oh, they might have screwed with me, so they're dead now, so they can't screw me. Now, a lot of his paranoia also turned into jealousy with his wife. He thought that she was having an affair with him, so he decided that one night he was going to get out on the ledge of his home, shimmy across this ledge, and he tried to peek into her window to see what she was doing, and he fell off and died. The villagers then exploded with joy that this man was finally dead, buried him standing upright, as all people of power in that time were. And the next morning, they woke up to him banging on their doors with wooden bowls and demanding blood. They would fill up a bowl with blood. He would drink it, and he'd go to the next home and keep repeating that through the whole village. This went on for a very short amount of time until one of them, in one of the legends, went to a neighboring chieftain and then asked him to, like, hey, this tiny little vampire dick's running around asking for blood, and we can't do anything about it. You need to come and help us. And him, being a chieftain, is just like, yeah, well, I can't really let an undead man run around tormenting people. I should kill him. So he sneaks up behind him, stabs him in the back, kills him, buries him. Next day, he comes right back at his shenanigans. And they go back to him and is like, hey, we thought you killed this guy. We thought we were all good. So he goes back and kills him again. Yet again, comes back one more time. The chieftain at this point is just pissed. He can't do any, he doesn't know why the man's not staying dead. So he finds, in either legend, a druid or a Christian that tells him how to slay the undead, which is by stabbing him or killing him with a sword made of yew wood, burying him upside down head first, sprinkling his grave with ashes and thorns, and then placing a giant fuck-all boulder on top of it. If you miss any of these steps, he's gonna come back and he's gonna keep doing what he was doing, asking for blood. Finally, once it's done, he stays dead, and there's no more things. There's no more problems with this. He's gone for good, or at least still there, stuck forever. And the funny thing with this is that the tree in Slotaverte is still there to this day. And apparently in the 90s, someone bought the land and wanted to cut down the tree, and the brand new chainsaw that they had bought failed 3 times at turning on. And when, now this is where it gets a little jumbled, some of them say that the chainsaw snapped and sliced off one of the workers' hands, but another one states that the chains, when they were trying to pick up the rock, snapped and sliced off a person's hand and sprayed blood all over the grave. But nonetheless, somebody lost a hand, and everybody's left it alone since then.
Another thing that I was reading, and it ties into the folklore and why of blood drinking, is around that time a lot of Ireland was experiencing a lot of famine. There was a very short amount of food, and they would do bloodletting with animals, and they would drink the blood to sustain themselves, or they would make relish cakes, which are meal, vegetables, and blood made into a patty that they would consume because they didn't have really any food source, like sustainable food source at this time. This is pre-harvesting potatoes and actually growing a lot of crops in Ireland. It was a lot of towns would have bloodletting stations for your animals so that you could let blood and collect the blood. And go about your business.
Gross.
Fucking yummy. I don't know about you. Don't know about you, but I had a couple of fucking relish cakes tonight myself. Most importantly, it was cow blood. Makes it much more rich and fatty. Delicious. Drinking blood right now.
Gross.
drinking blood right now. It comes in a convenient can that's green and says Mountain Dew. It's a lie. It's blood, alien blood.
Or it's alien pee.
Either way, fine with it.
Good
Sterile.
old mountain goat piss.
Sterile and like the taste. So a lot of vampiric stories throughout the culture of the land, um, they talk about ghouls coming to life, and they don't really come. They talk a lot about the Fest of the Dead, celebrated on October 31st on Halloween, to honor the return from the grave or other world. But they don't really describe the vague and misty ghosts that we all talk about with being associated with the dead. They describe more of zombies, of corporeal beings and substantial beings, and of like family members or loved ones that would come back and eat you out of house and home. Essentially, they would just come and just have this unsatiable hunger that they would just eat and eat and eat until morning, and would eat you out of house and home where you had just no food left. And there's some recounts of a a priest coming back to kill his mother, and he could never get in because you had to actually physically like let them in. Hence the other lore of having to invite a vampire into your home, or they wouldn't be able to come in. So if you just leave your doors locked, you're safe. Um, and there's other lore of women coming from their crypts to lure children to take back with them to the grave, to the other world for the next time. And a lot of these are all centered around just the ability to not sustain themselves with food and having to resort to bloodletting and using blood as a mixture to incorporate into their daily lives to just survive. Um, there's other fairy tales and folklores that specifically actually talk about uh, bloodletting more so than just asking for a bowl of blood for just walking around going, "Oh, hey, I need your blood. I need your blood to sustain myself." But was more of he would kill people and drink their blood and use their blood to actually make food. Um, there's an Irish fairy tale, excuse me, that revolves around Cork County, and it's it's referred to as the blood drawing ghost. His name was Michael Deary, son of Edward Deary, and he was a vampire known not a drifting wraith, but a corporeal being that would force a young girl to carry him upon her shoulders all throughout the countryside whilst he slit throats of people sleeping with a razor blade to mix blood with his oatmeal, and he would sit at the house and eat the blood oatmeal. And that also has to do with famine. So like a lot of just like the lore of Dracula has to deal from famine, of just not having any kind of substantial food source to support you or your family, so you have to eat what you can when you can.
Gross. So gross.
Yeah.
Hey man, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Hey, at least he's keeping his iron up.
Got to keep your iron levels up, man. It gets cold in Ireland.
Get anemic.
So there's another story about blood drinking fairies in the McGillicuddy Reeks. Uh, it's said to guard a lonely passage, but travelers in the region beware lest thy become the prey of the drac-ula. Unfortunately, they never gave the actual location of where this evil fortress was, that you could, not take this path and become a food for somebody else. Um, but they just, a lot of this is all about like locations where they just never had enough food to sustain themselves and move forward in life without having
Well,
to
I mean, that makes
bloodlet.
sense. It makes sense that they would start. All these legends would come from this then, with all this blood being thrown around. It's
Yeah,
understandable that they'd create a monster that lives off of blood.
yeah. Bram Stoker was born, fucking centuries later, but he grew up. His mother was born in Ireland, and his handmaids would recount stories of this Dracula to him as a child, which, like I was saying earlier, could have really, inspired him later in life when he began writing these novels. That Dracula, the king of the vampires, is really Abhartach. Explains like everything, the way to kill him, how he acts, how he operates, and all of his mind control powers that he can have, and just his charisma and his ability to lead. It can all just stem from this one original folklore. And then we get into the Black Hag, uh, a legend from County Limerick. It mentions an evil abyss at Shanagolden Abbey during the late 16th, early 17th century. The history of antique, or in a book called The History of Antiques of Old St. Catherine's Abbey. It's a journal of antiquities and everything. A woman of Fitzgerald's, which links her to nobilities, allegedly drank blood of novices in order to maintain her youth and her great age. Uh, she was further regarded as a witch and a cup teaser, whom the nobility of the countryside consulted before they would wage war with another. After Abbey was abandoned, she continued to live there and was known locally as the Black Hag. Her blood-drinking ghost condemned to remain there because of her past iniquities, and she still haunts this ruin to this day. And she had a lot of sexual prowess for those times. She dabbled in the black magic, uh, and a few of her legends link her to a local aristocrat and chieftain by the name of Abhartach.
Hmm.
So through her powers that she possessed, she was able to speak to him after his death. And that's where she would drink blood because it kept her youthful in her older age. She would attack travelers, and it was put in a stronghold to keep her locked in, and that's when they burned her. And there was a duchess at the same time that they actually buried at the same site, mistakenly thinking that she was passed away. And when they actually dug her up, they found that her fingertips were down to nubs because she was actually clawing and digging her way out, trying to get out of her grave because she actually never passed away.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah,
no matter how bad of a thing you've done in your life, being buried alive is just not an okay way to go.
Yeah, like the more I started reading into this, the more I started seeing like, oh, like there's interweavings of all these different types of folklore that just come back to the same similar place of vampire and blood famine of Abhartach. Like it just all keeps coming back to him every single time. Like um I lost my place on my page here. Get Fitzgerald talked about them. There was a castle built and destroyed in 1690 during a Williamite confrontation with the Jacobites, the legend concerns the one-eyed Teg O'Carroll, also one of the Dark Prince of Eye, who slain his brother Thaddeus across the altar rails in the bloody chapel of Leap Castle in South Offaly. Because of this blasphemy, his evil soul was denied entry to the afterlife and must remain within the walls of this battle. I can't think of the name of this battle real quick, but the two they took this field, and the Jacobites were just overrun by the Williamites, and they had just a river of blood cascade down this mountainside, this hilly area into a valley, and they actually named it the Bloody Hollow for the amount of blood that pooled down there. It actually made a pond of blood.
Oh Jesus! Brutal.
Blood pond.
Yeah, it was just it was a complete slaughter fest, and it's a haunted location today where you can see apparitions floating around the battlefield and all of that stuff.
Sounds like an awesome place to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be real sick to go and just do visit all these places in Ireland that are haunted.
Oh yeah.
It leads us to the main theory here that Bram Stoker actually, took the legend and the folklore of Abhartach to then shape it into Dracula and to what we know today as, the king of vampires, and spawned off plenty of other books, short stories, movies, video games, you name it. He went in and made this masterpiece and this great novel. Abhartach can be placed firmly within a tradition of Irish nobility and chieftains who had shown an interest in the consumption of blood. However, does this fit Stoker's creation of Dracula? The legend of the Vampire King was well known in many parts of Ireland, and the tradition of the blood-drinking dead was also recorded in Geoffrey Keaton's History of Ireland, written between 1629 and 1631. In chapter 10, Keaton made much of I'm going to butcher this word, the Nemon, something like that, which was the history of Ireland has been translated, several times, once into Latin in 1660 and then to English in 1723 under a new title named A General History of Ireland. But it was the historian and folklore Patrick Weston Joyce who actually made connections between Abhartach and the Irish traditional vampire. Joyce enthusiastically recounted the legend in his own book, A History of Ireland, Dublin, 1880. This was 17 years before Dracula was first published, and it is believed that Stoker, then a Dublin civil servant, read Joyce's work and presumably the Abhartach legend with some relish. Around the same time, manuscript copies of Keaton's work were placed on public display in national museums in Dublin, Ireland. They were on loan from Trinity College Library, who possessed two copies of the manuscript. And this display included Chapter 10 on the undead. Although Stoker himself could not read Irish, he had many friends and acquaintances who may have received at least part of the translation. Might not the legend of Vampire King, coupled with a strong tradition of drinking blood Irish chieftains and nobilities recounted to him as a child by his Sligo-born mother and the Kerry maids who worked about his Dublin home, have eventually coalesced into the idea of Count Dracula. Stoker was not writing from any great experience of Eastern Europe. He had never been there and was relying heavily on tourist accounts of the region. His experiences may come more directly from Irish folklore, even the name his Irish Renaissance. In Irish, drac-ula means bad or tainted blood, and whilst it's now taken to refer to blood feuds between persons or families, it has a far older condensation. So, can we really consider this to actually be, you know, the original storyline of Dracula that he morphed with the ideas of tourists that were coming to Ireland that have been to Eastern Europe? So he could have,
Well, I mean, it makes sense because I mean, both vampires. If we're going off the fact that even if it's based off of this, both vampires have clearly different stories. So it makes sense that he got a lot of his ideas from this case of a vampire to create his monster.
I agree. It's like he took what he knew as the folklore and just transported it to Eastern Europe and was like, "Hey, yo, instead of this being like oh, I'm hungry, I need your blood in a bowl," it became more of the actual famine side of it, as he needed this blood to survive. That if he wasn't drinking blood, he was gonna die and wither away, and that he slept upside down because that's how they buried Abhartach. Like, you had to stab him with a wooden stake. Couldn't kill Abhartach unless you stabbed him with a yew wood sword. Um, so a lot of things really do come from this folklore into just, you know, oh, hey, he wrote this great amazing novel, and he never even went to Eastern Europe when he wrote it. He wrote it strictly from Ireland on accounts of people that have traveled from Eastern Europe to him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just he just took what he knows as the legend of Abhartach to new heights by just moving him to Transylvania up on a mountaintop in this dark, gloomy setting that he just terrorized a village, which, I mean, Abhartach terrorized the shit out of his people. He just kill you because he thought you were going to do something.
Tiny little bastard.
I mean,
so much anger in such a little package.
Yeah, he would then just, I could really see this being a big turning point in the fact that, okay, yeah, this is it. This is what he's doing. Like, he's taking his folklore and his legends from his childhood and of his home area and expanding it and making it his own, and just making a vast story arc about this tiny little folklore. He just spun it to make it more appealing and more like have a more edgier and scary side than just this.
Just threw some polish on it.
Than this little dwarf that's unkillable. He turned it into this extremely
so terrifying.
This extremely charismatic, had a lot of sex appeal, and had needed this blood to survive, and that he would turn other people into vampires to spread the disease, and then, I mean, just look what it's become today.
Spawned movie after movie about vampires.
Multi-billion-dollar idea.
From Underworld to Twilight. The good and the bad.
Well, and then to Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
Hey man, you leave fucking Hotel Transylvania out of this. That's a damn good movie and you know it.
I'll agree with the first two. The third one, not so much.
The third one was more of a comedy to me. It's just there's so many like spin-offs. Like you said, there's Twilight. There's a spin-off vampire movie of Twilight called Vampires Suck. Like they have completely taken this.
There's even spoof vampires.
Yeah, like they've made spoof vampires where apparently the Black Eyed Peas are really vampires. Like
That's
just,
hilarious.
I mean, if you haven't seen it, it's called Vampire Sucks. It's a completely terrible film, but it's hilarious. It's just a stupid
it's funny.
comedy film. Like if you enjoyed watching like the dumb spoof movies after scary movies stopped,
Like,
you'll
not another
love
teen
it.
movie.
No,
Hey,
like
that's a good movie. How dare you?
like epic movie or like shit
Yeah,
like
oh
that.
God.
Like those
Yeah.
movies. Those are the
Those
ones.
fucking
It's
movies.
yeah, it's just like those movies. The same comedy format, just vampires, and it's dumb, but it makes you laugh if you watch it for that. So like it spawned even TV series like the series The Strain. That's
Oh yeah.
that's a really good series about vampires. I mean, one of my favorite vampire movies of all time is Interview with a Vampire with Brad Pitt and Tom
I
Cruise.
love that movie.
It's a
I
really
have not seen that movie.
yeah, it's a really good movie. It was made in the early '90s. It was before Tom
Oh,
Cruise and
yeah.
Brad Pitt
Mhm.
were like mega
Old.
stars. Yeah, it was
This
before.
was on their upswing.
It was also it also has I'm gonna butcher this name, Antonio. It starts.
Banderas.
Yes, he's in it as
Antonio
well.
Banderas.
Ah,
Yeah.
So was Slade. What's his name? I can't think of his name right now. His last name's Slater.
Christian?
Yeah, Christian Slater's in it. Like
Huh.
they had a lot of star power, and this was like all before they were like super fucking famous, so they could really pull it off. Kristen
Yeah.
Dunst is in it as a wee little child.
Oh,
Oh
What's
yeah.
that one? What's that one vampire movie? I think it also has but Antonio Banderas in it, but younger version.
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Oh
That one-
yeah,
that
you're
was my
thinking of
favorite
Dust.
vampire movie.
Yeah, dude. Fucking Quentin Tarantino. Got George Clooney in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Danny Trejo's in it. Selma
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yelnach
he's-
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's in it.
Yeah, that's a
Hayek, yeah.
fantastic movie.
Fuck, I can't remember if it was. I think yeah, Chong. Cheech was in it.
Yep.
Yep, Cheech was
Oh,
in
He
it.
had the belt with the pistol. He had the belt with the pistol in it.
Yeah.
And no, he didn't. That was another guy.
He didn't.
No,
Oh, I
no.
thought he was one of the bar patrons that was trying to
no,
fight back.
he was a biker.
No, he was like.
Yeah, he was a biker. No, Cheech was one of the vampires.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one that gave that super vulgar ass speech in the beginning of it. That we will not recite here. We already pushed the limits a little bit. Not gonna recite that one. That one's pretty vocal, like vulgar speech there. Like it just the amount of stuff that has come from a folklore that I never even knew about up
Connected the
until
two,
yeah until recently that literally all this stuff really had stemmed from the 5th century of a crazy dwarf chieftain that was a paranoid schizophrenic and all of this amazing lore and history and novels and some questionable films and some really good films and then fucking Twilight. So like it all stems back from the roots of just this one folklore, and um, it's kind of one of those things where like it makes you start to think like, okay, that's the folklore of Dracula. I mean, there's not much folklore into Frankenstein and his monster, because yes, the monster's name's not Frankenstein. The doctor's name was Frankenstein.
Okay.
If people
always
need
get
that
wrong.
clarification, it's Frankenstein's monster. The monster never had a name.
Besides Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, his name was Frankenstein's monster. But like the history of the Wolfman, like a more in-depth what like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like
Yeah.
all these fantastic like I guess they're all considered to
Invisible
be
Man. That one really didn't have too much.
the universal monsters.
Yeah.
Like what are their like main stories? Like where's their origin point? Because you don't just think of certain things. Like the Invisible Man, you can come up with that pretty easily. You can come up with Frankenstein, a guy putting together parts from other people to recreate life. You can come up with that stuff, but like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that's got to have some basis to it. Then or like the Wolf
Well,
Man.
it's kind of like that theory in an I can't remember who it is, so I'm not quoting it. I just remember reading about it. But that humans don't have uh, actual original thoughts. They all stem from what we've learned or what we read, and we pull from those without us really thinking it. So to us, it is original. To other people that don't know anything about the past of it, it is original, but they all stem from different portions of other things that you've read and seen in the past.
Yeah.
It's like it all has an origin somewhere.
Like that I'm kind of curious about the whole Van Helsing thing for Dracula as well. Like is fucking is he the chieftain or is he like the druid or saint? I mean, I guess he would be the chieftain because he's the one that puts Dracula to his end.
Yeah.
Well, you got to think that with a lot of those stories, that Van Helsing himself was only one of the few, was just one of a very few men that decided to fight against these monsters.
Yeah.
He was just the most famous of them all because of his stories.
Yeah, because he took down the king of vampires.
So even with this origin story, there were people that knew about these monsters. Like, if we're going off of these things as being true, then like the druid or the Christian hermit, they knew how to kill these things. So that means that there were other people that were definitely going around killing these things,
Yeah.
just not as
Yeah.
widespread. So
And also, he
there
may
was
not
more
be the
people that
first.
knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just Van Helsing may have been the one that, like, he might have just been the hero that was created to fight these monsters in the
Yeah,
stories.
like Beowulf.
Yes.
I mean,
It was
it works.
So he's kind of like a more human Hercules, or it's just there's always a hero. No matter what, if there's a villain that exists, there's always a hero to combat that villain.
You always gotta have a face to your heel.
Because
Yeah.
exactly.
Having two
Like,
villains don't work out. I mean,
can't have all bad. There's got to be some good. Got to keep that hope up in people's hearts.
yeah, I mean, just watch Freddy vs. Jason. That'll tell you exactly why you don't have two villains going at it.
We'll just fight each other.
Yeah, kill some people along the way, but I mean, it's very interesting to me, like just to look back at pagan folklore and think like, damn, one of the most recognizable novels of all time could have really been inspired heavily from this short story. This little bit of lore could have inspired the one of the greatest novels of all time.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to see if it is some of the actual stuff, because then it makes a lot of sense where those ideas came from.
You could start putting pieces of it together.
Yeah, like just recounting the book, like just like going back and thinking about it, like a lot of the stuff that goes on, if you take it out of Transylvania and bring it to Ireland, it's really a lot of the same material you could still use. It's just one of those things, like it's like really, really mind blowing that somebody can come up with this giant novel off of this tiny folklore and it just becomes so popular.
And it's created all these other worlds and everything,
Like he's
all off of one folklore that just sparked the imagination.
yeah, just one folklore literally it literally created in the 30s the monster universe at Universal, the Universal Monsters. It literally
Yeah.
it created that's our like today's version of the MCU in the 30s was this monster cinematic universe that all these creatures actually lived in the same central story figure. Spawned a kick-ass TV show, The Monsters. That's the Addams Family. Dick.
Dumbass.
Oh yeah, doodle
Pay
doot,
no attention to me.
doodle doot. Gomez.
Well,
Wednesday.
yeah.
Great, now we're gonna go off on this tangent. What the fuck is the Monsters theme song now?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
I don't remember it. I haven't watched it in so long, but I just remember watching it and it just being so fucking good and funny. Like even to this day, like I still go back and watch the fucking like original Dracula and Wolfman and Frankenstein and like all these things, which is actually kind of funny because like if you watch the movie Frankenstein, it doesn't go well with the book at all. Yeah, like there's actually one with Robert De Niro. I think the movie's actually called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and it goes like step by step along with the book. Like Frankenstein, like people also don't realize that in this book, like Frankenstein's monster wasn't some giant bumbling idiot. He was an intelligent creature. He could talk. Like he had thoughts. It wasn't just, "Arrgh."
Yeah.
He was just super strong, and he does kill a little girl, but it's because he didn't know his own
It's
strength.
It's completely on accident.
Yeah. And he actually like talks to the town folks as they're burning down his windmill that he's hiding in. He actually calls out and talks to them. He's not stupid
Some
He-
unintelligible
creature.
lumbering oaf.
Yeah, like he actually had collective thoughts and he knew what he was like. He knew he did wrong.
Just like the portrayal in the movie Van Helsing.
Yeah, except
Yeah,
his
he
name
was-
wasn't Frankenstein. Yeah, these movie monsters, because these things didn't come to life without the popularity of the original Dracula film and the popularity that the book got. And I mean, Bram Stoker isn't alive today to discuss, to say, yeah, I drew the inspiration from this 5th century Irish folklore about a crazy chieftain that couldn't be killed. And nobody really cared to bother to talk about that stuff like back then. They're just kind of like, yeah, dude, cool. There's an immortal being flying around as a bat at night and fucking sucking blood out of people's necks. Fuck yeah. I'm 100% down with this. Fucking best book I've ever booked. I can't say that. I got more books that I like better than Dracula. But it's a fantastic book. It's in my top 5. I couldn't give it the full, yeah, it's my favorite book of all time, because there's other ones that I can literally pick up today that I've read like 15 to 20 times that I can still pick up and just keep reading and reread the book over and over again. One, because it's entertaining, it's funny.
Everybody's got those books.
Huh?
Everybody's got those books.
Yeah.
It's that one book that they can't stop reading it over and over again. So
Like-
I love the story.
Like, I have to give a lot of credit to the band Ice Nine Kills for coming out with Every Trick in the Book. They're one of my top favorite bands, but they had an album dedicated solely to literature, and it's what kind of got me back into wanting to read these books again. Like actually read books instead of fucking not. Like, yeah, you fucking read, nerd. Oh shit, now I'm doing it. They have a song. They have a song called Bloodbath and Beyond, where they actually did their own interpretation of Dracula. And it's fantastic. They go into a lot of detail and a lot of subliminal messaging and any windows into the book that if you haven't read it, you wouldn't understand. And the song itself, even if you have never read the book, go look it up. It's a fantastic song, just well put together. But the meaning behind the song becomes a lot more when you read the book and understand where a lot of these references that they pull, because they don't pull these like, oh yeah, he drinks blood and has fangs and flies at night. They pull a lot of like small minor details in the book that make you see a whole scene opposed to just Dracula. Like they'll pull something out that they'll like set a whole scene of in your mind where you're like, oh yeah, dude, I remember reading that part, and it'll make you think about the book again. It was just really well put together. Um, there's countless songs that people have written about uh, vampires in general, Dracula being specific, but just all from this 5th century folklore, just from nowhere. Just some guy that was fucking hungry for some blood, couldn't be killed. Next thing you know, we've got Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then Bram Stoker's Dracula 2000. We don't really talk about that one.
Yeah, we're just gonna shelf that one. That one needs to not be talked about.
Yeah, it's a decent movie. Gary Oldman did a great job at being Dracula. Gerard,
He's a great actor, so
yeah, I believe Gerard Butler's in that too.
Huh.
I'm not 100% sure. I haven't watched that movie in a hot minute, so I can't I can't really be like, yeah, Gerard Butler. There was a young Gerard Butler-esque actor that was playing the modern day Van Helsing, essentially. But we would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. I highly suggest that you go and look up these lore yourself. Um, it's very fantastic, and you can really see for yourself by reading all of this stuff how they really go hand in hand on how he might have shaped his views on what he thought was Dracula. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Rogue Energy for giving us a sponsor. Use code Goldie OCG for 10% off at your checkout. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, on Twitch, and on YouTube, and Instagram, all under Odd Crew Gaming. And you can look us up individually. I am on Twitch as Goldie OCG, and I know Nick is working on getting his stuff set up, and Netsley will be working on his shortly as well. And we'll greatly appreciate it if you give us a like and a share and a subscription. Bye. You fucking Nancy's.